Okay. Yeah, the title of my piece, I'll just start right into it, is an analysis of the Clinton administration's decision-making during the August to September 1994 Cuba immigration episode. And I know that's a mouthful and a long title, but hopefully I'll unpack it here over about 40 to 45 minutes. And my style of speaking is usually not to use, to read from a text, but I have to do that today. So if I diverge a little bit, I'll keep careful to try to stick to my script. Just as a brief preface, what we're talking about here is a case a couple summers ago where a lot of you probably remember Fidel Castro, it looked like, was initiating or taking part in starting another immigration crisis like in 1980 with the Mariel boat lift, where a number of Cuban refugees were being pushed out to sea. And my analysis looks at that case and how the Clinton administration handled it. So with that brief introduction, let me go ahead and proceed. Before detailing the administration's moves during this period, my presentation today will offer crucial but brief background on recent U.S.-Cuban relations and the backdrop of inconsistency and indecisiveness that plagued the President's reputation in the international arena. I refer to that as Context 1 and Context 2, respectively. The study makes a number of assessments regarding the Clinton administration's decisions. For one, the administration reacted boldly to Castro's initial moves and did a solid job in not allowing the situation to careen into a crisis involving the use of military force, although it's uncertain whether the situation would have or should have reached that point anyway. Most importantly, the White House succeeded in preventing another Mariel boat lift. On the negative side, however, the study makes two central criticisms. One, although the administration took an uncharacteristically quick, tough approach to Castro's early moves, many of the Clinton administration's threats were ultimately ignored by the Cuban regime, a result that may have stemmed from the President's credibility problem in foreign affairs. And two, the administration's resoluteness notwithstanding, by the end of the crisis, the President had agreed to a refugee level that essentially constituted a vast increase from previous refugee levels, thereby possibly giving Castro the concessions that he sought all along. In sum, what early on looked like a potential foreign policy victory by the administration, and was so hailed by some accounts in the popular media, may in reality have been otherwise. Let me go into my first backdrop, Context 1, U.S.-Cuban relations. The Clinton administration supports, as its official policy, the 1992 Cuban Democracy Act. Okay? Assistant Secretary for Inter-American Affairs, Alexander F. Watson, states that the act has the dual intent of putting pressure on the Cuban government for change, what we call Track 1, while reaching out to the Cuban people through humanitarian donations and enhanced communications, Track 2. Track 1 is better known as the embargo, which has been in place since the Kennedy administration. Here's a quote from Alexander Watson. "We will not precipitously and prematurely lift the embargo. It has been and still is our strongest leverage for democratic reform inside Cuba," unquote. So that's Context 1. That's the Clinton administration's basic general policy before all this even happened. Let me go into Context 2, which I call the Clinton administration's defense and foreign policy. As will be shown, part of the difficulty the President faced in handling the situation resulted from his credibility problem in the international arena. This issue cannot be underscored enough. When reading assessments of the administration's foreign policy at the time, the most salient allegation was that the administration was indecisive and inconsistent. That's a criticism that still hounds the administration to this day. Whether this perception was justified is another issue. Its presence, however, was undeniable. The following citations that I'm going to read are not intended to beat up on the President, because some of them are tough, but to illustrate the heat that he was taking on foreign policy. I can't stress enough that this context is essential to understanding how Clinton's bruised reputation may have prompted Castro to act the way that he did.